So let me just quickly get going and give you just an overview, 10 minutes most, just because I think it'd be good to ground the entire audience in what TransCelerate is. And I think by this time next year, we will stop doing this. But into the second year, we're just trying to make sure people understand what we're doing, because there's a lot of folks who still don't know what TransCelerate is. So we don't want to launch into it and have people confused. So the pharmaceutical industry has, for many years, as the panel was discussing earlier, looked at collaboration as one means, not the only means, but one means of reducing the incredible cost of drug development. If you look at the overall, if you look at the graph of drug development, we're one of the few industries where new technologies come, efficiencies are being applied, companies are merging, yet the costs continue to escalate. And there's something fundamentally broken with how we conduct the clinical trial enterprise in particular. So there's opportunity there. So companies have been speaking for years, in fact, about collaborating in the pre-competitive space. There's opportunity there. Long and short of it is, after lots and lots of discussions, finally about 3 years ago, a number of R&D heads of some of the major pharma companies decided we're really going to try to do something about it, not just go away and come back a year later and speak about it again. So they commissioned some work from a number of people from some of the companies that today are members of TransCelerate to go and take a look at what is it that we could potentially collaborate in the pre-competitive space. What's doable? What has the most value? And there were a number of areas, as you can see from that graphic, that were potential areas. And none of them are areas that we're not going to be involved in the future. But for now, clinical trial execution was seen as one of the low-hanging fruit. It seemed to be rife with problems in terms of how we do clinical trials. Some of the things that the panel prior described, which methods from 15, 20 years ago being applied today to a modern world. And I think there's lots of room for change. So an organization was created, TransCelerate. It's a not-for-profit organization. It is an organization, and then the key words in our mission statement, are to accelerate and simplify. And those are the two key words that we're looking to do at TransCelerate and from the clinical trials perspective. And in terms of our mission, to collaborate. That's the primary vehicle with which TransCelerate functions and does what it does. And we have, taken a number of things that are important to how we function. And the last word there, under the core values, is courage. You needed courage to try something like this because it has been tried before. Multiple consortiums have come and gone with mixed results, and I'm being nice by saying mixed results. Most have not delivered value to the participants of that particular consortium. So today, TransCelerate is a formed company, 10 companies on the left-hand side, with the chartered members of TransCelerate. And then in 2013, we had 20 members, but one member company has left because it was acquired by a larger company that's not a member. So that brings us down to 19. And in a few days, few weeks, we will announce some additions to our membership of some very substantial company. Very quickly, we started off 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago, and that's the time the company has existed, with 5 projects. Those were the asterisks that you can see on that slide. And these were projects that were selected by a group of folks from the biopharma industry who felt were projects that were amenable to some immediate collaborative actions. And not really making any real decisions of what those might look like, but intuitively they all made sense. Can we do risk-based monitoring better? Can we create a platform for investigator-shared platform? Can we look at comparative drugs in clinical trials and find a better way to source them, get better information? And so those 5 projects were initiated. And then sometime last year, we decided that that's great. We've got 5 projects which are delivering, and we'll talk about that later in the Q&A, but they are delivering, and it's one of the differences that we have in terms of what we do in TransCelerate. We are not just talking. We're saying if we're going to take on a project, it has to be actionable, and we have to come up with something quickly, or we're not going to take on that project. We're not determining policy. We're letting others determine policy. But if somebody were to give us a policy, say on transparency of clinical trial data, we can help operationalize it with a large bulk of the R&D environment moving in a particular direction, whatever that might be. So last year we decided, well, it's great that we have these 5 projects, but can we be a little bit more strategic? And one of the things we did, I should say the member companies folks did, some of their best people, you know, in TransCelerate, it isn't people who have nothing better to do at Lilly or, you know, AbbVie. It's some of their best people are assigned to TransCelerate. And most of the projects, in fact, all the projects, are managed, run by member company staff. So they got together to say, well, how do we strategically look at what we might be doing in 3 or 5 years from now? So they determine what they felt the current state of clinical trials looks like. And you all know the pain points there. And what should it look like in the future? What should the future state of clinical trials look like? Big data, huge data, connected interfaces, more patient-centric trials, and a number of other things of that nature. And so then the question was, how do we get from today to that future state that we've now determined for ourselves? And so projects from 6 to 11, in fact, there are 2 other projects that are in the exploratory phase, which will probably be commissioned fully, one in a few weeks and another one in the first quarter of next year. So 13 projects in total. But certainly, the projects that come in after the other 5 fit that strategic roadmap. Some are foundational to what we want to do in the future. If we are going to have clinical trials of the future look similar from a data structure perspective, we should participate in the clinical standards with a project with CDISC and under CFAS collaboration. Can we accelerate it? Can we make it happen faster than it would otherwise? The shared investigator platform, if we're going to have a shared investigator platform, it needs an investigator registry for it to be really functional the way we want it. So projects we're now picking either fit and enhance the value of a prior investment, or they fit the roadmap moving forward. And I think as we roll out more projects in the future, right now we're taking a little bit of a break. We have plenty on our plate. It's overflowing. So we want to make sure we're not just doing more projects because they happen to make sense. We're making sure we're doing projects that fit our roadmap, they make sense, they deliver, we understand how we're going to move them into day-to-day practice and no longer be projects, and then we'll start taking on more. So we've been very cautious. We've learned a lot of lessons on how consortiums fail. Sometimes they fail because they try to do too much. Sometimes they fail because they don't have the right people in there. And often they fail because they have no way to implement their ideas and test them, iterate upon them, and then improve upon them. However, TransCelerate can't exist as an entity by itself doing its own thing because it's got a whole bunch of pharma companies. It needs to engage the larger clinical trial enterprise. And with that, we work very closely. I'm on the Leadership Council of CTTI, for example. We work very, very closely with Bio and Pharma and IMI. Then the CFAS collaboration is the project I mentioned to you earlier with FDA, CDISC, Critical Path Institute, and TransCelerate working on therapeutic area data standards where we provide substantial expertise and funding to that particular project. And then obviously we work very closely with the regulators at the leadership level as well as at the project level. And there's not much we do that isn't with regulator perspective involved in the projects before and often after. And I will say this to you, yes, the regulators are conservative, but they find it much easier to work with 20 companies trying to do something than an individual company with an individual idea. It's not because they're being difficult necessarily, it's just harder for them to provide advice in one place without being sure how it's being implemented and how it might spread. So when you have a group of 19, soon to be 20 companies, it's a lot easier. And these aren't just 20 companies, you know, futzing around with a few clinical trials. They do a massive number of clinical trials, so they can impart impact, and we can look at metrics and improve upon some of the ideas we have out there. Because not every idea out of the gate is great. Sometimes you need to improve on it. And then obviously we work very closely with the sites. Again, I'm on the Leadership Council of SCRS, the Society for Clinical Research Sites. We were at their summit a few days ago. And the sites, and we are actively involving the sites in pretty much every one of our projects. We are taking the perspective that we're not going to be arrogant enough to say, we think we know what your problem is, dear site. We're going to say to the site, you tell us what your problem is, and we'll work with you to make sure that's what we tackle, not what we think your problem is. So sites are actively involved in many of our projects. We've created these site advocacy groups. There are sites from around the world that participate at the project level, providing advice and input so we can iterate upon that particular project. And last but not least, we work very closely with others in the ecosystem, and we can, the CRO organizations, NIH, NCI, and also the regulators and CRO associations in Japan. I'll stop there and move it back to Jean, and she can take over the Q&A.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so to kick things off, I'd like to ask the panel to comment on why you believe TransCelerate has been successful, and also give me an example of how TransCelerate is driving positive changes within the industry. First, start with you, Thor.
Yeah. Maybe the easiest start is to say that an organization which is just 2 years old and delivered such much, that describes what success is. I mean, we started with 5 work streams, and all of them are visible and led to tangible results. Let me focus, and you asked for an example, let me focus not in detail on the well-known things like risk-based monitoring. That was not an invention of TransCelerate, but due to TransCelerate, that was kicked off and pushed, and is even today in the afternoon, I think, a major topic of that meeting here. And some others. Let me focus on things which are not so visible for most of us. For example, the site qualification and training. It is waste of time for a site, for an investigator, for a coordinator, for a study nurse, if they continuously have to repeat the same kind of training materials for company A, B, C. 3 months later, X, Y, Z comes with the same things. Yeah, GCP for beginners and for advanced guys. Things like this. So in the meantime, I mean, we worked on curricula. Within TransCelerate, we established those. We established common accepted certificate, and the latest figure which I heard is some 65,000 certificates were issued. This is the latest official figure. Maybe we are in the range of well above 100,000. Think what this means for the sites in terms of they can really focus on what matters. Another piece, and then I end already. Standardization, that is one of the most critical issues in our industries in the years to come, standardization. And there are many things to standardize. What is the definition of an indication? What are in- and exclusion criteria? And fully admit that in a company like my own, it is not that when we talk the development of asthma, and it is about the definition of something very simple like moderate asthma. Ask 5 experts and you get 6 answers, and this is also seen in our protocols. And questionnaires to be used. So what is the definition of a disease and around? And I must say that together with partners, and Dalvir alluded to them, we in the meantime have quite an impressive list of standard sets, and we adopt them. All the companies use them, and coincidentally, in my company, we are embarking on several new indication areas, and we immediately embark on that. So this is also from a company, the member company's perspective, a clear success.
Okay, perfect. So Jonathan?
But from my perspective, I think what's been most impressive is we brought these 19 companies together, and trying to herd 19 companies together to build alignment, one would think would be challenging. It hasn't been that challenging. We move forward by consensus as an organization. We've got an operating committee that meets every other week for 60 minutes. Most of us have really busy schedules, yet all the operating committee members make time for that meeting. We've got work streams that have over 500 members from the different companies. So you can imagine how challenging it is to coordinate it, yet we've made great progress on a number of work streams. When I think about the consensus, it really is truly consensus-based decisions at TransCelerate. We're not moving one company's agenda over another company's, but we're looking at it from the industry in terms of how do we make a difference. Thor mentioned some of the work streams where we've added value in terms of site qualification, training, risk-based monitoring, which you can hear more about later. One that I think we don't often talk about is the comparator network. One of the things we have within TransCelerate is we've got a comparator network where member companies can make transactions with other companies to buy both active comparators and placebos that can be used for clinical trials. We've got almost 10 member companies now who are involved in that. And what it really means is you can buy product directly from another member company, get all the analytical data, get the shipping information. So you'll have all the information you need, and you also know where that drug product originated from. Some of the big wins we've seen is we had one company make a purchase. There was some storage out of specifications. They immediately went back to the originator to understand more stability data on the shipping conditions, only to learn that the material was still good and could be used. So we see value there, and we see value in the transactions of having companies work with one another.
Okay, thank you very much. Dalvir, how is TransCelerate engaging with the CRO community? I know you mentioned it earlier, but we've obviously got a lot of CROs represented today. I think they might be interested to hear a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Jean. But before I go to that, let me just make one comment to the question that was asked to Jonathan. It is a challenge to get 18, 19 companies to work together. But I think what Jonathan, first of all, through his expert leadership of the operations committee, but I think we've all got to the point where individual company agendas are not going to solve the problems that we have. And so it's this collective understanding that I may have to give on some things for the betterment of us all that is making that difference. So it's not suddenly that everybody's become nice people, it's the pain is no longer bearable. And so you have to learn to collaborate. But to Jonathan's point, the folks that are on the operations committee, on our board, aren't people who have nothing better to do. They run like ClinOps, like Thor and Jonathan for these companies. And the board is made up of people from the R&D level, and they make the time for this to work. So, and that's key to why this has been successful. But just going to your question, G. We have been looking at how do we collaborate with different stakeholders around us. One of the most important stakeholders clearly is the CRO industry. To a very large extent, the vast majority of the actual work that's done by biopharma companies is done by their CRO partners. And as such, we needed to find a way to engage with that particular part of the stakeholder group more strongly. We've done that with sites, but how do we do it with CROs? The struggle has been how, as opposed to why not. We've always wanted to do it. And I think as of last week, we put out a press release. We've created, working with ACRO, ACRO is going to create a CRO forum. That's a press release that went out, I think, last week, Monday, if I'm not mistaken. So go to the press release at ACRO's press release, and it has a charter of creation of a CRO forum that will invite non-ACRO members also to participate. This is one of our stipulations. We didn't want to work just with the major CROs. We wanted to work with all CROs that were interested in participating. And the forum will create a mechanism, a liaison mechanism to collaborate directly with the work streams that make sense for both the CRO organization and TransCelerate to work on, so that we can be more proactive, we can share draft documents, we can get input on information, as opposed to currently where CROs are exposed to much of our output, so to speak, from the member company when they implement. So we want to kind of change that paradigm a little bit, and I encourage you to go to that press release, click on the link to the charter that they've put on there, and see how, if any of you are interested that are not ACRO members, could participate in that.
Okay, very good. Thor, can you share some of the TransCelerate solutions that Boehringer Ingelheim have adopted and the value that is being realized as a result?
Yeah, I can share that we adopted almost all. I mean, it is really in day-to-day life, its value. As I said, the data standards, when a company embarks on, even for this company, new development projects, new indications, then it is of utmost importance that you have a common standard, which is, even for partners of this company, which may be a beginner in this area, acceptable by agencies, understood by sites, and understood in the company. So this is, I must say, a major thing. For Boehringer Ingelheim, the comparative drug work stream is also extremely important. It's not, and I'm saying that loudly, it's not that in the past we had any projects where we failed to get the supply, but the time we needed, the money we spent, the uncertainties we had even trials, unfortunately, which we had to stop because we run into problems with stabilities and other things. And I mean, I don't know exactly how many transactions where we participated and where we gave versus where we got. And I think it's also less relevant. More important is that this creates certainty for us and also for our patients. It's a safety piece also, I have to say.
Yeah.
Just those two.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Jonathan, we've touched on this a little bit already about the unique challenges that may arise from 19 companies and providing the governance. Was there anything additional that you wanted to add on how you manage this portfolio of projects?
Yeah. I would probably add to what Dalvir said earlier. You know, we've got 11 projects ongoing. We're not short with the amount of work and great ideas that come from the member companies. So on an annual basis, we spend a lot of time looking at the current projects, potential new projects, and then how do we bring them on and integrate them into the ongoing book of work. When we formed a little over 2 years ago, there was lots of discussion amongst the 10 member companies that came together on, you know, how do we pick those first 5? How do we manage those? And as an operating committee, we're really focused on developing solutions, developing them rapidly. We're not trying to reinvent things as an operating committee, and I think when we do, we've got a number of members on the board, different steering committees that will give us feedback in terms of how do we stay focused. So as an organization, we really are trying to bring solutions to the projects that we have. We will be sunsetting projects as we move forward, and as we sunset them, we will be able to take on more projects.
Okay, thank you. So last question from me before I open it up to the audience. Dalvir, I understand that TransCelerate recently met with the FDA to share data from multiple risk-based monitoring pilots across the member companies. Can you share a little bit about the learnings to date and any output from that meeting?
Sure, but I will also encourage those of you who want the real details to go to a session that's run by my colleague Reb and a number of other TransCelerate member company folks on risk-based monitoring. I think it's at 2 o'clock, 2:30, something like that, this afternoon, so more details there. But to the point you're making, Gene, for many of our projects, as I mentioned earlier, we engage the regulators to make sure that their guidances aren't going in some other direction to what we might be trying to do. And in the case of the risk-based monitoring project, from its very inception, Reb and his team engage FDA and engage EMA to make sure that what we were doing made sense for them, that any guidances they may be considering aren't going to be contradictory. And you'll find that some of the guidances that are coming out now look very similar to what we're doing. That's no accident. We are collaborating to make sure we don't go off in different directions. That said, you know, we now have well over 40 clinical trials in multiple therapeutic areas across multiple companies using the methodology that we have outlined, which is, by the way, most of the things we do at TransCelerate is open and available to the public. They're on our website. Everything's on there, not just the position paper, but the methodologies. And we'll continue to do that wherever possible. There's things we cannot do. You know, we can't share comparators unless you're a member of TransCelerate because there are liabilities involved in that. But whenever we can, we share it. So even the shared investigator platform, I should say, at some point in the not too distant future, after our 3rd release, Cognizant, the vendor who's developing it, will be able to have it available to whomever wants to use it. So we're trying to make sure things don't remain sort of like the TransCelerate thing. We want this to help the entire industry move forward. But going back to your question, 40+ trials, enormous metrics coming out now, and 8 of those studies are pilots with the FDA, and that's what Reb and his team shared. And I'm happy to tell you that the metrics that we are getting so far look exactly as we expected them to be. Quality's not been impacted. Timelines aren't being badly impacted. And what we are seeing is a shift in effort, pretty substantial shift in effort. And the effort at the site level is shifting to an effort more in the centralized way, and that has connotations from how much effort we put into monitoring. And we also, you know, I think Reb will also give you some information on source document verification, and I won't tell you what that is, because I'll let him describe it in his session, but it is actually quite scary, the data that we have to show you how much effort we waste on SDV without real value. I won't give you the percentage because I'll let him do that later on this afternoon.
Let me just add here, the discussion, as Dalvir alluded to, are not only ongoing with the FDA. TransCelerate is a global initiative. So specifically this topic, risk-based monitoring, is heavily on the focus on other agencies as well. So it's EMEA, it's individual agencies in Europe, it's Japanese PMDA. So this is a global exercise.
Thank you for making that point. It is very global, and we are meeting with all the agencies on RBM. In fact, in 2 weeks, we're meeting with the PMDA in Tokyo, and one of their topics is, tell us more about risk-based monitoring and how it's going to be impactful in Japanese clinical trials, for example.
Okay, very good. Right, let's open it up for questions from the floor. So if we have the same format, oh good, we've got a lady down there, same format as before, if you give your name and who you're representing and then your question.
Does it work? No? Hello?
Yeah.
Now it
We
works.
hear you.
My name is Jeanette Dimsitz. I come from Novo Nordisk. We're not a part of TransCelerate yet. I want to congratulate you on the initiative. I think there are a lot of great ideas. Obviously, also some challenges. So I hope I can be allowed 2 questions. One is on the investigator registry. How is this going to be tackled in terms of personal data protection?
Yeah, so for the investigator registry, obviously that team is looking at the laws and the regulations country by country. So it's being built off of the drug dev platform. What we'll be looking at is starting with countries where we don't have certain regulations we have to deal with, and then we'll go country by country as we build that to make sure that we're consistent and we're abiding by the local laws with what we can disclose and what we can't disclose.
Okay, thank you.
But beyond, just to further that, beyond the laws of the land where the data is, there's also the appetite of the company of how much they want to do versus not. So we have to maneuver through both those particular paradigms.
Let me add here, because it is so specific, because even in close units like Europe, you have huge variations. Because of it is extremely complex, and this needs know-how on the legal side, on many sides, public relations and so on. And therefore, individual companies would have a very extremely difficult hurdle to overcome. And therefore, it really helps to combine the know-how and the knowledge in those various companies we have.
Yeah, it's
So
very
another
complex.
another reason for Novo Nordisk to.
Thank you, Thor.
My other question is, we've been working on an investigator platform at Novo Nordisk for a number of years, and knowing how complex and costly this is, it's a great idea to do a shared. But obviously, Cognizant is not in this for their blue eyes. So how is this going to be financed? How is the whole cost side of it once companies are going to join in?
Well, let's make sure we're talking about the right thing here. The investigator registry is not...
No, not the registry, the platform.
Shared investigator platform. Yeah. Well, the project lead for that is sitting right over there. If somebody can give her the microphone, I'd like her to answer the question. That's...
So maybe at a high level, as a high level, before Jackie Kent describes it, what I would say is when you look at the shared investigator platform, a lot of work has been done to really understand not only how do we build something for the member companies, but longer term, how do we get it out to the industry? So Jackie, you maybe want to...
So yes, it is true. It's a very individual company expensive initiative. So if you think about the actual development of a software application, we're doing it across 19 companies for the same cost as one company, right? So that shared cost is significantly less. And again, from the services that we'll provide, right? Software maintenance, hardware maintenance, a global help desk. Anybody that's engaged in a global help desk knows that's a significant investment. And again, we're allowed to then share that cost across all the member companies that choose to adopt. So it is significantly less per company in doing this in a collaborative forum. Cognizant has been providing an outstanding partnership with us, though. They're in this for the long haul with us, and they believe it's a good investment on their part also.
But let's not forget the most important player in this is the poor investigative site.
Yeah.
We drive them nuts with usernames and passwords and different looks of portals. This is an attempt, and we were at a summit where a very large site leader stood up and said, we feel like Christmas has come early because what we do to them in terms of all our differences is very, very hard for an investigative site to manage. And this is one of the key things that we're doing that we think will make a big difference. Thank you, Jackie, for stepping in.
There's a question over there on the far side.
Thank you. My name is Alan Bindels from Hoffman La Roche. So Corsi Sanders is also supporting this initiative. I'm very interested in the shared investigator platform. So can you tell a bit more, let's say, when this will be rolled out and when the first studies will actually use this? I think a lot of people might want to know. And also, how do you collaborate with the other initiatives like CFAST and IMI?
So I won't have Jackie stand up and answer that because I already can give that answer on her behalf. So this is not a project that's in sort of, let's think about doing a shared investing. It's being built as we speak. The first release of it will be in the first quarter of next year. And we believe sometime in the May to June timeframe, the first study will be in the platform from one of the member companies that's the early adopters. 5 of our member companies will adopt it at release 1, others will adopt it at release 2, and some will adopt it in release 3. And only because some companies have very advanced portals that have functionality that they're going to wait for, and other companies have no portal or we're going to invest significantly in a portal that can come on earlier. So I hope that answers your question. But in terms of IMI and CFAST, did you say? So for the CFAST collaboration is an actual project. So we have provided TransCelerate member companies provide bridge experts, subject matter experts, therapeutic experts, and so on to the collaboration, which includes FDA, Critical Path, CDISC, and us. TransCelerate doesn't set standards. We will never set standards. We're not a standard-setting organization. CDISC is. So here we're partnering with another organization to help them move the standardization process faster. We're providing substantial funding to build a shared meta repository, which is now active, which allows for faster movement of therapeutic area standards through the FDA and all the other reviewers so that we can get it and use it. Did I answer your question?
Okay, another one here.
Thank you. Alina Pszczółkowska, AstraZeneca. I'm actually the part of the TransCelerate, the investigator registry works, and I can only advocate for the initiative because there is really the great collaboration in the team and a lot of value. So I do appreciate to be a part of that. But the question I have refers to the presence of the TransCelerate, or rather the focus on the different geographies. So we still see that TransCelerate, as originated from US, is very much US focused. So is there the appetite from the TransCelerate for the more strategic approach to move to the other geographies, and it includes Europe, but also Asia, which is quite active in the clinical trials area?
Great question. So obviously, the member companies represent companies that are not just US-based. So they're Japanese-based companies. We've got European-based companies. We started off with a real focus in the US, but obviously we're only a little over 2 years old as an organization. We are engaging health authorities around the world. We've got work stream members from around the world. We're now having more and more sessions globally to educate both companies in different regions of the world and health authorities on what TransCelerate is and what we're not. So as Dalvir mentioned, there'll be a group that will be at PMDA in a few weeks. We've had engagement earlier this year with EMA. We've had a number of work streams reach out to colleagues in different parts of the world. So we are becoming more and more global. And I would say as the organization continues to grow with membership, which will increase, with different work streams, we'll continue to look for opportunities to leverage the diversity that's across the globe.
And if I may add a little bit to what Jonathan said, one testament to the fact that what we're doing is global is that over 20 different countries have member companies that are meeting together. In other words, say in Italy, as the TransCelerate member companies, as implementation starts to roll out, are getting together to make sure that they understand any particular cultural, regulatory nuances for Italy versus Japan, where we're going to have a member meeting, or Spain, or Australia. There's 20 plus countries where actively the member companies, implementation folks, are getting together because they are now being exposed to the work as opposed to the idea. And that, I think, is testament to the fact that we are global, our companies are global, our projects are global. Yes, there was a focus on the United States to get going, but that's going to be behind us very, very quickly.